Right, for more on the work of the National Council of Provinces and this planning session that they'll be holding at least over the next 2 days now, I'm joined by the NCOP's Deputy Chairperson, Poobalan Govender. Deputy Chair, good to have you and thank you very much for coming on this evening. Firstly, let's start here. I mean, you are gathering for this planning session with a particular theme around the policy implementation agenda, if you like, or oversight agenda in the 7th administration. Is this something that you have done in the previous administrations, or is it something you're doing for the first time, or is it something that you're doing with a different priority focus this time around?
Well, firstly, good evening, Tavo. Good evening to you and your viewers on Newzroom Afrika. Thank you for this opportunity to have me on your program. To respond to your question, this is not the first time that the NCOP is embarking on the three-sphere planning. It has been done before in the 6th administration also, but we are taking it to a new level in the sense that we want to streamline the work that is done at all 3 levels of government, starting from the local government, provincial government, and at national government level, in order to ensure that the projects that are planned and projects that are on the ground are indeed taken to fruition, and the money that is budgeted for these projects indeed benefit the people that it is intended for.
Yeah.
Very often we've heard of projects that are started, it is budgeted for, millions of rands are spent on those projects, but we find in some cases it is incomplete. Either the project managers run away or the contractors run away, and the communities are left destitute once again. So we are trying to remedy that by having all 3 spheres of government working together and not in silos in order to enhance service delivery to our people.
It's been a constant challenge, if you like, for the last 3 decades in South Africa. It's a typical South African challenge of a policy paralysis, if you want to call it that, where over and over and over again, you hear South Africa has got good policies, but we fail at implementation. Now, we are sitting 30 years into democracy. We are still talking about the NCOP coming together to talk on legislative measures that can be put in place, oversight mechanisms that can be put in place, how to foster cooperation between the 3 spheres of government. Why?
Well, you see, this is exactly why we have embarked on this route, where we get the different role players in government. For example, today we had mayors there, we had ministers, we had deputy ministers, we had people from the different organizations that support democracy making presentations, telling us what their plans are for the year to come. Now, what we will then do is to take those plans on board and look at them as a cohesive whole to ensure that those plans all are in synergy, so that each level of government is not duplicating what another level of government should be doing and is doing. So in that way, we will be able to streamline the work that is being done at all 3 levels. And the question that you're asking, why after 30 years we are still looking at this? Remember that democracy is on a learning curve in our country, and we have embarked on this now to say, let us do things differently. Let us ensure that we have a tracking mechanism in place, so that all of these plans that are now put on the table, we will ensure that those plans are tracked, and we will go physically as the NCOP to see that these plans are really implemented on the ground, and that communities and government is getting value for money in terms of the expenditure.
You're saying your approach to oversight is going to be based on is it 4 or 5 pillars that the president would have highlighted as key focus areas in his opening address earlier this year. Now, one area is that of inclusive growth. There have been a number of policies there. Employment equity, triple BEE. You've got the mining minerals charter. You've got the public procurement bill now that is in place. You've got institutions like CETAs that are supposed to help in the inclusive growth component. Now you've also got the NHI bill that has been added there. What is going to be your approach on that component of economic growth?
Well, with regard to all of those components that you just spoke about, the role of the NCOP is going to be essentially oversight. We will ensure that we watch those various programs. We ensure that those programs are enacted in a manner that will benefit the people of our country. Because very often you find, as you are saying, there are many programs in place, but we find that those programs are not really given expression in a manner that it will benefit people on the ground. And one of the main reasons for that was that there wasn't sufficient oversight to hold people accountable to ensure that these programs, even though they might be massively funded, but they need to find expression so that people on the ground will feel positive effects. And there, thereafter we will see that there will be a shortage of the number of service delivery protests that we are seeing, because right now people all over the country are protesting, and you don't blame them, because you find that in many instances you have projects that are funded but not really implemented, and that is where the NCOP will now come in, and we are taking a very strong view, and we have been given the assurance by the Deputy President that he will support the work of the NCOP, and he has also ensured us today that we will receive the full support of the executive. And especially now that we have the GNU in place, we know that all ministers are working hard, and we will support their work while at the same time monitoring what they are doing.
Of course, we've got the triple challenges in the country, which which unemployment is really at the heart of it. Job creation is another pillar in the president's opening address that will be a key focus. Now we've just received the second quarter numbers. Employment, or unemployment, if you like, has gone up 12.3 million. If you're looking at the expanded definition, South Africans are out of employment. If you look at the ages 15 to 34, 46.6% of young people affected. If you look at 15 to 24, it goes up to 70%, which means it's a huge, huge problem. Do you believe we've got beneficial policies in place?
Well, you're absolutely correct when you talk about youth unemployment. That is a major challenge for us. And it really, encouraged us when the state president, in his address at the opening of Parliament, made a rally call for South Africa to become a construction site. And if you look at the interest that is now being shown by foreign direct investors who want to now invest in our country, that is a clear sign that the investors are showing confidence in our country now that we have a new government in place. It is a clear sign that once you have foreign direct investment, once you have construction taking place, investment taking place, that will create thousands of jobs. And once you start creating jobs, you will then attend to the question of inequality, because then people will be able to live a better life. They'll be able to put food on the table. They'll be able to afford homes. And once you have that kind of socio-economic growth in our country, we will then see that people will benefit, and there will be a sense of enthusiasm within the country itself, and that will address those social ills that we are seeing when it comes to things like crime. Crime is one of the things that is basically caused because people are out of jobs, and therefore they will resort to various aspects of criminality. So we are saying that now that the president has made this rally call to all of us to ensure that the country prospers, and right now we know that there is talks with even the Chinese to come in with a lot of investment into our country, as well as other countries that are now looking at investing in South Africa. So that is a clear sign that we are on a path of growth.
What would you say to those who, especially Labour, who are stakeholders in this, would look at the job of the NCOP and saying, well, your oversight work is going to be in vain if that's what you're going to prioritize, and you're not going to deal with what they call structural defects in the economy around 3 areas. One, emphasize on beneficiation policies. So there needs to be a change in that legislation that allows for the minerals that are mined in this country to stay in this country and benefit the people of this country in terms of the byproducts that come out of there, not quickly be extracted and go outside of the country. 2, they would want policies that say, reduce this advancing into mechanization, because that leads to the labor being put out slowly and slowly while profits are continuing to increase for the private sector. And others would say, look at the monetary policy. The high interest rates are certainly what is killing us. What would the role of the NCOP be there?
Well, you talk about the minerals leaving our country. The same can be said of the forestry industry, where you find that timber is leaving our country. Same with gold and diamonds being processed, overseas, whereas those jobs can be given to South Africans if we have the industrial sector that will up its game in terms of us having the factories here, having the manufacturing plants here in our country. And that is why I'm saying that once we have foreign direct investment that will establish that kind of industry here in our country, we will then be able to create those jobs. Our minerals don't have to leave our country; they can be processed and then exported. In that way, we will find that we will be able to create those jobs that you spoke about earlier. But also keeping in mind that we need to ensure that we create the business environment that will ensure that we have people that are skilled. We have thousands of young people who are qualified young people, but they require the necessary skills. And this is where we need to interact with the universities, with the training colleges, to produce the type of skills that our country require, so that the young people especially can find the type of jobs that they would like to get into. Because there's no point in us producing labor for those parts of the economy that don't really need that kind of skills. So skills development, skills transfer is something that we will prioritize and ensure that we produce that type of labor market so that people can actually get skilled jobs. And as you're saying, our minerals don't have to leave our country; they can be processed here. Yeah. You also spoke about the interest rates. We will be lobbying with government to ensure that we reduce the tariffs. We ensure that clothing and so on is produced in our country, and we don't have the kind of industry where we find that we are importing a lot of clothing, a lot of shoes, and so on, when those type of commodities can be produced right here in our country.
Yeah. The chairperson highlighting that the NCOP needs to go a little bit deeper into looking into the Intergovernmental Relations Framework Act. Now, in recent times, certainly on the show here and maybe in other platforms as well, we've had a situation where local government would now and again be wanting to declare an intergovernmental dispute. For example, the Umgeni municipality saying, look, we want to be the ones who are collecting electricity from Msunduzi because a particular area in there is now falling under our jurisdiction, and saying, well, we're about to declare an intergovernmental dispute. Or you hear the city of Cape Town wanting to declare intergovernmental dispute around electricity tariffs and so on and so forth, where some of the functions lie elsewhere and not necessarily in the local government sphere. How do you plan to deepen the work there as far as the objectives of that framework?
Well, the intergovernmental framework is very clear in the way each sector of government should conduct itself. Now, when you have those sectors that are calling for some kind of a change in the way the government works, that will take quite some planning. That will take quite some dialogue, and there will have to be a lot of discussion around those issues, because you cannot just change legislation overnight. And this is where the work of the NCOP comes in, because ordinary people on the ground, even in organizations on the ground, they can make submissions to the NCOP if they feel that there are certain parts of our legislation that needs to be changed in any way or to be amended in any way. They can do that, and that would be considered. And that is part of the work that the NCOP does, to amend legislation if it is found to be feasible. And we will look at those things, but it is not something that can be done overnight. It is not something that can be done as a knee-jerk reaction just because one sector of government says that that something needs to be changed. So, if, as you're saying, Mgeni is saying that, we need to change something, let them bring it, put it forward, and then, we will have a look at it, because part of the work of the NCOP is to ensure that we have public participation. We go out there, we listen to the communities, and then we will consider and make recommendations to the National Assembly if we think that certain amendments are feasible.
Now, you've highlighted a report by the National Planning Commission that seeks to put in place what you call clear administrative architecture to effectively coordinate this development. What do you imagine that would actually look like? What is an administrative architecture that could effectively work here?
For any government structure to function effectively, there has to be clear guidelines. There have to be clear laws in place. You cannot have different arms of government working independently, working in silos, and not conforming to the laws of the land. Yeah. Now, the moment you have that kind of situation happening, then there will be chaos. So that architecture that is being spoken about by the Planning Commission is that sort of alignment to ensure that the laws of the land are aligned in such a way that all three spheres of government work hand in hand, work in association with each other, so that one arm of government does not duplicate what is being done by another arm of government, thereby incurring wasteful expenditure and finding that they are tripping over themselves when it comes to providing services to our people. So the alignment is something that the Planning Commission is actually talking about when they speak about what their plans are going forward.
So what would that look like, for example, in practice? Let me give you a scenario where we have the infrastructure grant, if you like, or the human settlement grant that is usually given to municipalities to do particular maintenance to infrastructure or to eradicate squatter camps. The municipalities then don't use that grant for what it's intended for, and each municipality decides how they use that depending on the needs of that municipality. Some at province are suggesting that grant needs to be ring-fenced and put something in place administratively that forces municipalities to say, if this money has been allocated for this, use it for the maintenance of electricity infrastructure, use it for the maintenance of water infrastructure, and don't use it to buy trucks, for example, for waste management.
Yes, Thabo, you're absolutely correct. And this is something that we find that is really unacceptable, where project monies that are ring-fenced for a particular purpose are not being used. And then we find that that money is then diverted to some other project that it was not intended for. And this is where the oversight comes in. This is where we will need to be more stringent in terms of ensuring that monies that are appropriated for a particular purpose and ring-fenced for that particular purpose is indeed used for what it was intended. Because very often we find that some municipalities do not fulfill their mandates and spend the money as it is supposed to be spent. And monies are sometimes returned to national treasury because municipalities and even government departments in the various provinces do not spend the money that was ring-fenced for a particular purpose. And it is unacceptable that whilst people are crying out for services, monies are being returned to national treasury. And then you find that those very same government departments are then saying, we don't have funds. When we question why wasn't a particular project completed, or why is there no service delivery in your area, they'll say that there's no funds. But yet, those very same municipalities are returning monies. So we are now going to be very, very stringent on that and ensure that monies that are ring-fenced for a particular project are indeed used for that purpose and not diverted to any other purpose. And we find that this is done especially towards the end of the financial year, where we call fiscal dumping takes place, where monies are just spent willy-nilly, and you find that the projects that the money was intended for are not really delivered to our people.
Yeah. What is the legal, if you like, status of your oversight data? I mean, can you take municipalities to court? How effective can you use that particular data? Because we hear all the time parliamentarians conducting oversight. For example, they went to the road accident fund and they said files were sitting on the floor and record keeping was a disaster there and so on and so forth. But what happens with that data afterwards? Is there some legal power that is sitting with that data that you can use and get institutions to actually comply?
Well, this is where the question of accountability comes in, because every government department has a CEO or a head of that department, and that CEO or that head of department or that minister needs to be accountable. And if we find that the road accident fund, like you said, those issues are now being exposed because people that are put in places of authority, and they are supposed to ensure that those particular departments are well run, are well managed, and are fulfilling their mandates. If they are not doing their work, then yes, they will be held accountable, and they can even be charged for not fulfilling their mandates, and also ensuring that monies are spent according to the way it is supposed to. And especially if you find that in the past you had people being appointed to certain government departments that are not fit for purpose. They don't have the necessary qualifications, they don't have the necessary experience, and that is why you find that work is not being done accordingly. And very often there's large-scale corruption, and that is also being exposed right now. Yeah. And people are being held accountable. People are being charged for that kind of maladministration and criminality, and that sort of thing is now is going to come to an end, because the government is now absolutely serious about ensuring accountability and good governance.
Deputy Chairperson of the NCOP there, Poobalan Govender, appreciate your time. Thank you very much for coming on.